Good morning. I can't hear you, CJ.
Said I have a lemon laptop. I'm so sad.
Oh, that's okay. Mine decided to reboot too,
Okay.
or update.
Having my appointment's Tuesday. I couldn't do it now because I'm going to be without a laptop for a week and I wouldn't be able to finish the course. So I cannot wait until Tuesday and then however long it takes. All right, let's pull up.
So you're gonna have to deal with the broken laptop?
Well, I have to take it to the Apple store and they're not. So I can take it to the Apple store and then I'm going to be without a laptop for 3 to 5 days while they fix it, right? Because it's still under Apple Care. I've only had it for like a month. Um, but it sucks because I'm past the 14-day period where I could just swap it out. Um,
Oh.
and they have some resellers. They're like, okay, we have verified Apple partners that may have a loaner. So I might look at that, but I don't know why I feel weird about going to a certified Apple partner versus Apple. I mean, because I guess it's all the same within the warranty, but that's the only difference. If I want a loaner, I'm gonna have to go to a third party company.
Yeah.
And I mean, and at least they found some for me. They told me that which two in my area. But I don't know. All right, this is all pulled up. We left off on quality management. So,
Control costs.
oh, that's right. Yeah. Control costs. And then we share the screen and usually desktop one and play the show. All right. So we ended with control cost with earned value management. So do a quick recap. So where did we start on that day? We started at where did we start?
Um, Manage stakeholder engagement, I believe.
And then we went through execution. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll start in execution. Where we direct and manage a team, and that's where we get data. The only place that we get data as an output, and deliverables are produced as well. The data themselves, the deliverables. Once we were done in the execution group, not only did we produce those data and deliverables, but if there were any approved change requests that needed to be implemented, we went ahead and did so as well. And the output, again, was data and deliverables. And we then moved on to manage knowledge on a team. And so we made sure that we gathered explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge that was a little bit more difficult, but had to deal with, sort of your experiences. And we were able to put all that stuff into a lessons learned register, just like our stakeholder register and our risk register. Now we had this lessons learned register. Okay. And so we put that in there and we felt good. We then went on to manage quality, which we've always known as quality assurance. And we know that managed quality during execution is process focused. It's focused on the process of the of the individuals doing the work and not necessarily the deliverables themselves. So we went on and we did that. And again, we felt good about it. And we had some test scenarios and some test documents that were also uh, provided to us as a result of the effort. And we put some more information into our quality and test report. We got some change requests based on the nature of the work that we were doing. And based on that, we said, okay, quality is being assured. We are assuring that everybody's using the same type of tools. They are gathering the same types of metrics. They're reporting them out in the same manner. And so we said, okay, let's now go on and acquire the team. And so when we acquire the team, we noted that now there's no more networking. Now it's time to negotiate, right? So we went and acquired the team, and we may have needed the help of procurement in that sense. We may have had some negotiations for labor, for third-party materials, whatever it may be, but all the resources we're getting, the rooms that we might stay in, how we're going to communicate with each other. everybody having a license on Salesforce, all of that stuff. We acquired all the resources that we need for this project, and we wanted to ensure that they remain on the project. And so as we continue executing, that's what the role of this process is going to be. It's going to get people on and then ensure that they stay on. You continue to negotiate with those functional managers if you need their employees for, another 2 or 3 weeks, right? So we continue to do that. And then we move on to develop the team. So now that we've acquired all the resources, let's make sure that this team is a cohesive unit. And we go through that forming, storming, norming, performing, and then adjourning, and we come back. Anytime a new team member joins in, it takes us all the way back to forming. And so we note that as we develop the team, we get a team performance assessment as an output. And we felt good about training everybody. We felt good about the conflict resolution techniques. We thought about when there's issues with stakeholders, how sometimes we can smooth things over or accommodate, but that's a lose-lose situation because it didn't really solve the problem. While it might have emphasized points, areas of agreement, it did not solve the issue. And then we thought about, well, we could compromise and reconcile. But that's also a lose-lose because each party had to give something up. And we said, okay, someone could withdraw or avoid the conflict. And that's still a lose-lose because if someone else walks away, leaves the argument, you still didn't get them to agree to your issue. So still a lose-lose. And then we said, well, we could force or direct it. And that's a win-lose. But one party's going to lose, some parties are going to win. So somebody's still going to be unhappy. Or we can get to the compromise, reconcile, or the collaborate, problem solve, where both parties work together and they find common ground to solve the solution, using both efforts. And so we say, okay, those are the 5 conflict resolution techniques. PMI doesn't say that any one is better than the other. They simply say, what's the best one? Get everybody to not compromise, but give it to me. I'm drawing a blank. Collaborate, problem solve. Yeah.
Problem solve.
Collaborate, problem solve. It's collaborate / problem solve. Those are the 2 ways they'll use it. Right. And so we say, okay, that's great. That's what we do. And so then we moved on to thinking about managing the team and the individuals. And we know that when we work with individuals, when we manage the team, that process is when we're just working with one person, one individual, versus when we develop the team, that's when they're talking about the entire group or 2 or more, right? So when I'm taking questions on the exam, you'll note that if it ever talks about a single person, automatically I know it's manage a team. I can just stop. I don't even have to continue reading, right? But if they're talking about 2 people or more, now I know it's develop the team, right? And in both instances, you do got to kind of be careful because they could, if they're talking about getting those resources, whether it's one person or 2 or more, then we're talking about acquiring resources. Okay. But felt good about those processes. And so we said, okay, now that we've got all these people on, and let's distribute information. Let's start managing communications. Let's make sure that all the stakeholders receive the right information, the right level of granularity in the proper format, and at the right time. And some messages will get pushed, some messages will get pulled, and some messages will be interactive. It can be formal or informal, verbal or written. And so we know about that. We start sending stuff out. We go and we implement our risk responses. We avoid the threats. We transfer the threats. We mitigate the threats. Avoid by doing something different, transferring by introducing a third party, mitigating by taking some action or activity to minimize the probability and or impact. And we see the money. We can see the opportunities. We can share the opportunities, bring in a third party. We can exploit the opportunities. Like when we avoid a threat, we do something different in order to fully exploit the opportunity. And by the way, that like literally on the exam, that means you stop what you're doing, right? So if I'm going to exploit an opportunity, that means that I must stop whatever it is I'm doing and I must do everything over there, right? Same thing with avoiding a threat. I see a threat, I'm walking, I see some bees. Oh, nope, I'm going to walk this way and I'm going to avoid them, right? So we can also enhance an opportunity. So just like we can mitigate a threat. Oh, I see some bees. You know what? Let me put on a bee suit. Okay. I can see an opportunity. Oh, some bees. Okay. let me go ahead and bring along, you know, maybe some stuff to make that they'll make a hive in. You know, I can build a little container and the bees will gather. I'm still going to do my original activity, but I'm also going to bring along this stuff, right? I'm going to enhance the probability that I get some positive benefits from this, right? Or I can simply accept it, actively accept, put aside contingency reserves for threats and for opportunities. You know, let's put aside some money. If we still see those bees out there, let's go ahead and start building a thing. Or we can passively accept it and say, hey, there's bees. Oh yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, maybe they'll make some honey. We can just passively accept it, right? So and we can do those with threats as well, putting them both on the watch list. So we've implemented those responses, which we can escalate both. And don't forget the contingent strategy and the fallback strategy. The contingent strategy, you stay the course, but you do a little something. So I see bees. All right, I'm going to walk through these bees because we know bees aren't aggressive to humans, but I'm going to bring my bee suit with me. Now, contingent response says, if I get stung, then I will put on the suit. Okay. Where fallback plan says, I'm walking this way. I see the bees. If a bee stings me, nope, I'm not going through the bees anymore. I'm not going to put on the suit, or I put on a suit because that's a change of plans, or I walk that way. Okay. So that's the contingent response strategy. You have the if then. If I get stung, then I put on the bee suit. So I have to wait for the risk event to happen, or then I have a fallback plan that, again, I have to wait for the risk event to happen. I walk through, nope, the bee stung me. Okay, now I'm going to go walk that way. Right. So don't forget those two.
Mhm.
Right. And then we thought about, we went and conducted procurements, and we note that, oh, we're not responsible for that. Just like we're not responsible for implementing a risk response, for, you know, distributing the bee suits. That wasn't our job. We also weren't, responsible for the conflict between stakeholders in the first instance, where they said, we like bees. No, we hate bees. We had to let them work that out. We recognize that we're not responsible on the exam for conducting procurements. So the folks that are going to go buy the materials for the beehive, we told them what to get. We gave them the specs, but now it's up to them to go and negotiate with the sellers, handlers, and figure that out for us, right? And so we went and conducted procurements. We sent out all of the procurement documents, RFPs, RFQs, RFIs, and we remember that RFQ is going to be request for quote and not for qualifications. So we sent all of those out, and we got back the responses. And that was the whole goal, is that we wanted to send out responses. We wanted to send out those RFP documents so that we can get a response and we can award a contract. And so that's what we did. We used our source selection techniques to do that. And we went through, we used proposal evaluation techniques, and we talked about some of those proposal evaluation techniques. So we did some of that. We then went through and we had make or buy decisions based on our make or buy analysis. And using those decisions, we determined the stuff that we were going to buy from outside, and we went ahead and we started buying those things. Okay, so we're conducting procurements now. And when we're done conducting those procurements, then we went on to manage stakeholder engagement. And by the way, when we conducted those procurements, we got the contracts as an output, right? We got accepted sellers, and then we got a contract, two different things. So that's what we did there. Okay, then we went on to manage stakeholder engagement. And as we managed stakeholder engagement, we used our stakeholder register that talked about when those particular stakeholders, would react in a certain manner. And we'll use that to make a plan to engage them, to keep them engaged at a certain, part of the project. So that was the whole deal. It wasn't necessarily about the strategies for the stakeholders themselves, because that's in the stakeholder register. This is all about a plan to keep them engaged. How do we make sure they participate and they show up? And that way we can get their feedback, and we can make sure that we keep our finger on the pulse of how they feel about this project. And so that's what we did. And we're like, okay, great. We're done with executing. We then went on to monitoring and controlling. And we noted that with the exception of monitoring and controlling that specific process, we noted that from perform integrated control, all the way down to monitor stakeholder engagement, all of those processes take work performance data as an input, which comes from direct and managed project team, and as an output gave us work performance information. And all that work performance information became an input to monitor and control project work, and the output is a work performance report. The only process that we get a work performance report as an output. And so we said, okay, monitor and control project work was all about variance analysis, looking at where we're at as compared to the plan, and then either using earned value management or trend analysis or regression analysis, using some sort of way to measure progress compared to the plan, and then using that same information to now forecast what the future is going to look like. So we're here today. The plan tells us where we're at compared to where we should be, and based on that performance, allows us to say, are we going to be where we're going to be next day, next month, next year? Okay. Then we perform integrated change control, and we didn't forget our 8 steps. We said, if anybody comes to us with a change, the first thing we want to do is prevent the change. Don't 5 whys. Why do we need a change? Why? But if we must do the change, then let's accurately identify the change. Let's go do root cause analysis and figure out what exactly must we change in order to achieve the goal that we desire. And now that we understand what the change is, go and analyze the impacts. What's it going to do to the scope, schedule, budget, or risk? One of those 4. And as long as someone on our team tells us, we take it at face value that must be true. As long as they give us 1, the exam usually gives us 2, we'll be good. And after that, we need to go and then file a change request, right? Document that change request, right? So we're going to prevent the change. We can't prevent the change. We're going to document the change. We're going to analyze the impact, and we're going to issue the request. Then our 5th step is we're going to get CCB approval. We're going to perform integrated change control. We're going to sit down in those meetings. We're going to negotiate with the sponsor. We're going to explain to them what the other stakeholders mean when they need this change and why they need the change and what it's going to do. And we're going to either get approvals or denials. We're going to update our documents in step 6. That way we know what the key stakeholders decided on in the CCB. We're going to then gather the team, and we're going to let them know, okay, change of plans. Key stakeholders accept, they approved 7 of our 10 changes. These 3 they didn't. Here's what we got to do. We're going to get their buy-in. And then in our 8th and final step, we're going to direct and manage the team according to the new plan. And those are our 8 steps. We will get change requests as inputs. As an output, we get the change log, where the change requests that didn't get accepted, they kind of die in the change log. And we get approved change requests as outputs as well. And as a result of making changes, we may get additional change requests as an output there. Obviously, project document updates, and obviously we may update our approach based on the types of changes we get. And so when we're done performing integrated change control, we went on to validate scope, and we needed to collect the sign-off from our stakeholders. And we noted that PMI says that we can control quality and validate scope at the same time. And we're about to see this process, but we hadn't done any testing or inspecting. So all of the deliverables that were previously tested and inspected, we went ahead and we're going to get those validated with the client. We're going to get their sign off, their approval. That way we can take all of those approved change, those approved deliverables, and use them as an input to close the project. So we noted that our deliverables they flow in different processes. They are an output from direct and manage a team with the original data, the raw information. And then we take it as an input to quality control, and we test and we inspect it, and that becomes a verified deliverable. And that verified deliverable then moves on to validate scope, and it becomes an accepted deliverable. And that accepted deliverable becomes an input to close project. And when we get the final accepted deliverable, then we can close the project. And so now that we got everything signed off on, and we thought about controlling scope creep, right? When we talked about scope creep, is not that the scope is growing, but it's that the scope is growing disproportionately with the amount of money or time that you have. Remember your triple constraints, right? That's scope creep. And internally driven scope creep. I did not mention this to you last time, I don't think. There's something called gold plating. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Okay, so
It's
gold plating is internally driven scope creep. It's when your team members are like, wouldn't it be nice if, wouldn't it be nice if we made the company logo the cursor? So every time they had the mouse of the company logo, and it's like, no, it wouldn't be nice. They didn't ask for that, first of all. And second of all, if they like that, why don't you give us an opportunity to charge them so you can be paid for your efforts? Okay, so no, and anytime in an exam, when you see examples of team members adding features and functions that were not requested from the stakeholder or that are not found um, in a requirements traceability matrix or within the scope, then that is gold plating for PMI. Okay, so we note that in validate scope, and we went on to control scope. So we wanted to ensure that none of that happened. No gold plating, no scope creep. And so again, we looked at variance analysis, we looked at trend analysis, and we used different tools to control the scope. And then we thought about the schedule as well. We thought about schedule compression techniques, how crashing is not risky, but it costs you money, where fast tracking is super risky because we're doing activities in parallel or out of order, but it doesn't cost us any additional money, at least up front. We thought about resource optimization techniques where we can level some resources, but we know that leveling does not care about the hard deadline, and it won't always, but it may push our schedule forward. Then we thought about smoothing, where in this scenario, we must respect this deadline. So can we do some discretionary activities earlier? If not, we just got to kind of roll with the flow. We thought about critical path, finding the critical path. We thought about all those different tools and techniques that we can use to control the schedule. And we said, all right, we got some schedule forecast. And then we controlled cost. And we did the same techniques for controlling the scope and controlling the schedule. But this time we looked at earned value management, where we made scope, schedule, and budget all interchangeable, all carrying the same weight. And we note that earned value is king. So when we memorize our formulas, earned value is always going to be first. So if I take the amount of value that I've earned, my earned value minus my actual cost, that gives me a cost variance. If I take my earned value minus my planned value, where I plan to be, that gives me a schedule variance. And those have happened in the past, and there's nothing I can do about it. And if I take my earned value and I divide by my actual cost, it gives me the cost performance index that's happening. And if I take my earned value and I divide by my planned value, that gives me the schedule performance index, and that's happening, CPI and SPI. And we note that cost performance index, earned value divided by actual cost, is the most important earned value management metric. We then thought about our 4 ways to get an estimate at completion, the forecast, because our budget at completion is the initial number that when we scoped it out. And so we thought about the one that we're not going to compute. It's not a formula, but we're just going to bottom up estimate all the remaining activities. We're going to add it to our actual cost, and that gives us an estimate at completion. It is not a formula, it's just a sum. And we note that we can take our budget at completion minus our earned value, add it back to the actual cost, and that becomes the first formula. When it's an anomaly, all remaining work will be completed at the original budgeted rate. We note that we can take our budget at completion and divide it by the CPI, and that gives us an idea of how the project is going to be if we continue burning money at the same rate, good or bad. A CPI below 1 is bad, above 1 is good. An SPI below 1 is bad, above 1 says that we're doing fast, we're working fast. And we also can take our schedule performance index, multiply it by our cost performance index, and then divide that by our budget at completion over our earned value, add that to the actual cost, and get an even bigger number if we're performing horribly, or a teeny weeny number if we're working fast and producing a lot of value. So those are the 4 ways that we can get an estimate at completion, the last 3 being formulas. And then we thought about, well, if the team's working fast and we're ahead of schedule and we're under budget, how inefficient could they be and still achieve the budget? Or if the team's been working slow or overspending, how over efficient must they be in order to achieve the schedule? And we noted that that's our to complete performance index, our TCPI, right? Above 1 says that they have to work a little more effective, and below 1 says that they can blow off a little bit of time. And so we note those formulas and we say, okay, great. We have everything we need for controlling quality, controlling cost, controlling schedule, and we completed earned value management. And here we are now, and we're getting ready to test for control quality. We're getting ready to ensure that we keep our resources on. We're getting ready to ensure that we've sent out information in the right way, that we're implementing risk responses in the right way and still looking at them, that the vendors that we've, that we're holding them to deliver the contract and the materials that we got are performing up to their, their quality standards, and that our stakeholders are participating in doing the things that they're supposed to do when we monitor their level of engagement. And then we'll close it out by closing the project. Warmed up?
Yep.
All right. So quality control, now known as control quality. So this is where we're going to use the quality work results, AKA when we test and inspect those documents, they're going to let us know if, we need to have change orders or if we need to go and change the process or something like that. All right. So it measures the completeness. Did we do it all the way? The compliance, is it meeting its requirements with consistency? And the fitness of the product and service. Does it work together in the system? Now, throughout the project, we compare the work results to the quality requirements, right? That's going to be in our requirements traceability matrix. And if things are going bad, then we use it to identify opportunities for improvement. We'll go into our quality assurance and say, let's change the process, right? Or we'll just completely do some rework and fix it. But either way, we want to be able to get sign off. Okay. Now, we see the outputs. We're going to get the measurements, of course, but the verified deliverables, those that have been tested and inspected, we'll get some information, right? Data in, information out, any requests for change, updates to our approach or documents. Let's look at these tools and techniques. We've already talked about some of these, so we're not going to see scatter diagrams anymore, but you remember the scatter diagram? Sort of the way that we can
comparing two variables.
And then the histogram is just a bar chart. Okay. And then the control chart, we'll see that. You remember the cause and effect diagram. You have the fishbone diagram. Okay. Testing and inspecting, pretty straightforward. Nothing to talk about there. When we say data analysis, this is us performance reviews. This is us, this could be a crash test, right? We've purchased a car. We gotta spend money crashing this thing and make sure that the engine drops. If it's 40 miles an hour or more, we get the crunching technique. Did the airbags deploy? All of these things we got to make sure that it's happening. So we'll see that in performance review. And if it's not, then we can go back and do root cause analysis to figure out why. Okay. And then questionnaires and surveys, right? That's another way to gather data. Just ask people to fill some stuff out. We could do statistical sampling, check sheets and checklists. We'll talk about those when we get in. All right, so we have the measurements, actual work that's done, the work performance information. This is as we gather data. Now we can sift out just the quality information from that data, just the schedule information from that data, just the cost information, right? That's how we get work performance information. And eventually we can take that to produce reports. All right, we may get additional change requests as a result of testing and inspecting. And those verified deliverables, they will comply with their specs, with their standards, their requirements, right? If it's going to meet its requirements, then we have to ensure that that's the case, that all of those things are going to happen. Okay. We take the plan as an input, the deliverables themselves that need to be checked, any approved change requests, because we got to make sure that now we've done the work according to that new plan, and in any data that will give us on past test standards or test reports. Now, the deliverables need to be evaluated, tested, inspected, right? So that way we can get final acceptance. So check sheets. Do we have an example? We don't. Have you seen a check sheet?
Is it just a list with the check boxes?
No. Let me just show you one. share. So, well, this is an aggregate check sheet. Okay, the actual check sheet. The actual check sheet is the one. Think the tallies: 1, 2, 3, 4 middle. Line 1, 2, 3, 4 line 1, 2, 3, 4 line. Have you ever seen a person on BART that's like counting people standing there?
Hmm.
That's so. Now this is the aggregate check sheet, and this one I think was like either Wells Fargo or Blue Cross, one of those companies I was working with. But anyways, seeing this their call center, and we can see the amount of phone calls that they get a day, like in the thousands. They get about 80,000 phone calls a day. Um, you can see emails. They get about 1 million, pieces of email. They get about roughly, I don't know, 70, 80,000 pieces of mail on average. You get about 50,000 chat sessions initiated, and a few thousand people can come into the branch on any given day. Okay. Then we note something happened on Friday. Their call volume went way down. Their email volume went way up. Their snail mail volume went way up. But on Saturday and Sunday, people started initiating a whole, like 3 times as many chat sessions, 150, 135, and a lot of people visited the branch. What do you think happened?
It was Christmas and people needed to get cash out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's what we do. That's how we use a check sheet. Is we can use this to identify areas for quality improvement. So we note that these numbers all in green are way off from our averages. And we're like, how is it that we went from on averaging 80,000 phone calls to 15? Let's go investigate why that happened. Why are people not calling? And then we
Mhm.
find out, oh, one of our phone systems went down, part of the PBX. So, it wasn't routing calls to people. They're just getting hung in the balance. So people said, you know what? Let me email them. That's why the email volume went way up. And then people started sending in mails, but because it's lagging and it takes a couple of days, we didn't see that until Saturday and Sunday. But a lot of people started initiating chat sessions. However, we don't have as many people that do that stuff on the weekends. So that's where we didn't see anything on that Saturday and Sunday. There's no mail being delivered, and you can't come into the branch on the weekend. But people started, showing up on Friday, and a bunch of people came in on Saturday who couldn't call. And so based on this, we can go back and say, okay, let's go investigate the phone system and go fix that. So that way we can bring these other numbers down. So a check sheet, the initial check sheet would have just had a bunch of tallies. And then we aggregate it into something that looks like this. And then we use it to go in and find quality issues.
Got it.
Okay. Showing you the wrong screen.
Yeah, I see your screen.
Okay. I thought that was going to happen because I was being fancy. Okay. So that's the check sheet. Statistical sampling. This is where you take one small sample and okay. I worked with this company that they take abandoned oil rigs and they dismantle them out at sea. And then Bessie, right? They dismantle it, the collar that goes down to the seafloor. They plug it up 150 feet. They dredge it with what looks like a shrimp boat to make sure there's any debris. And then Bessie, the Bureau of Sea and Safety something. It's part of the EPA. They come out and they'll take a measurement at the site, and then at 1 meter, 5 meters, 50 meters, 500 meters, and they look at the parts per million. And if one part fails, then the whole thing fails. That's statistical sampling. It's taking one small sample to measure the quality of the entire population. Now, in your life, a better example of this would be you make a big pot of soup, you take a little spoonful, nope, it needs more salt. That one little sample represents the entire piece, and so therefore you're going to add salt to the entire thing, mix it up, then take one little small sample. Yep, that tastes good, and you're going to go. All right, so that's statistical sampling. All right, there's also that's statistical sampling, but then there's variable sampling. This is not in the PMBOK, but you may be tested on this on the exams. Let's talk about variable sampling, right? And variable sampling is literally where we'll measure something on a continuous scale to see if it conforms. So like this pen should hold up to probably at least 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And so we'll then expose it to 115, and then we'll raise the temperature 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, 21. Oh, it's holding its shape. 122, 123. Oh, this thing holds its shape until 140 degrees Fahrenheit. That's great. No, it's not. That means that we're probably adding more of a compound, to hold its shape than it needs to. And we can back off on the formula a little bit. And now we can probably save money when we have a run of 2 million, 5 million, 20 million pens. We can probably do it now for 86 cents instead of 94 cents a pen, right? So we'll use that to see if something conforms. And sometimes it overconforms or underconforms, and we can bring our product back in line that way. Okay, questionnaires and surveys, pretty straightforward. Inspecting and testing, that's also pretty straightforward. Don't overthink those words, what they mean. And then we can analyze the data to see what's happening using performance reviews or root cause. So any questions on that?
No, that makes sense.
King. All right, 1 second real quick. Okay. Now we want to control resources. So we want to make sure that the physical resources we got, that conference room, the software that we're going to use, the training material, all that stuff is going to be available to us. The people that we got on the project, that they remain on the project, right? So control resources focus on the coordination of physical resources, not people. So keep that in mind as well. Like when you manage people, you cannot control people. So we can develop a team and we can manage a team, but you can't control people. We control the other resources. So I know when we acquire resources, it's people and physical resources, but then we develop those people and we manage those people, and then we control the rest of the resources. Does that make sense?
Yes, makes sense.
All right, so here we go with resource management, control resources. So our goal is to ensure the right resources available at the right place and time and in the right quantity. That's the final process in this knowledge area. And it summarizes where the resources have been sent and how they're being used. And then it informs us of status, right? So can we release a resource if they're not being utilized fully, or can we let another project borrow them? All right, so that's what this process will help us with. And I keep saying that, and it's like the coordination of physical resources, not team members. While this is true, the exam will, this is true because acquire the team, that process, even though it sounds like we're getting people, again, that is the process by which you make sure that the people who were supposed to be assigned to your project remain on your project. All right. Keeping that conference room booked, that's controlling resources. All right, so data in, information out. We see that as an output. Maybe you get requests for change, updates to the approach, updates to documents. So you can make sense. Just controlling, simply making sure that what we have isn't going to produce any new output. Right, and then we can use some of the same tools and techniques that we've been seeing. So the work performance information, that's the summary of the data, right? And then any change requests that we get. Now, You also have to understand if we need to change our approach. So any of the subsidiary plans or any of the baselines, right? And then any documents might be used, of course. If there's issues, that might be a cause to change resources, and maybe not human resources, but it may be, now we need to have 2 conference rooms and separate the 2 teams. We'll take the project management plan as an input here as well, because it's going to have the resource management plan, and that's going to tell us how we're going to use, control, and release resources. And then any OPAs, your company may have a process for doing this. From there, we'll take the data as an input as well. Remember, data out, information in, data in, information out, excuse me. And any project documents. And then we just do data analysis and problem solving. There's not a whole lot in the tools and techniques, right? We can use alternatives analysis. Oh, well, what if we meet virtually instead of using a conference room? We can have the cost benefit analysis. Yeah, people will be able to join the meetings a little earlier and stay a little bit later because we don't have travel time. And the economic impacts will be good. We have to pay for the office. And then performance reviews, right? We can analyze plan versus actual, who's showing up or what's being used. Trend analysis, look at the line. Is it improving or is it deteriorating? So don't overthink trend analysis. And then problem solving, pretty straightforward. Whatever your process is to solve problems, PMI is not prescriptive about it. They just say problem solving is a tool and a technique of controlling resources. Any questions?
No.
Okay. So now we are going to monitor communications and just make sure that everything that we sent out is, being sent out in the right manner. So that's our focus, is on, making sure that if there's anything that we need to change, that we change it so that way the stakeholders stay satisfied. So communications and stakeholder engagement are usually they kind of go hand in hand, but they are 2 separate pieces. All right. So monitor communications. So this gives us the lens of reality. And what we really mean by this is how many people are opening these emails? How many people are downloading attachments? How many people are leaving comments and feedback, right? That lets us know if our communications is doing a good job. And then that also informs us if we need to make any updates to our approach with regards to how we engage the resources. All right, so we're going to achieve this goal of ensuring stakeholder needs, right? The people, remember, your team members are stakeholders as well. All right, we're looking at the actual communications that have been delivered. How effective are they? All right, and then do we understand what changes need to happen? And then it can trigger changes. So that's what this process is. It creates the agility that allows us to adjust. And so we'll see these tools and techniques. We've already seen them: the expert judgment, using your project management information system, analyzing data, using your interpersonal skills. So nothing new. And we'll use these inputs to create these outputs. Pretty straightforward. Data in, information out. Any requests for change, any updates to our approach or our plans. We take data as an input in order to do that, along with documents in the approach. And then we use our expert judgment. You think about it. Yeah, we think it's going good. Like when you think about this on a project, it's okay. Yeah, everything is good. We send out emails. This stuff is there on Confluence. We have, other pieces available, and it seems like everybody knows what's going on. I'm happy. And we can represent that data in charts and in graphs. And we can use our interpersonal skills. We can just have conversations with people. We can observe what's happening. So the engagement matrix, again, as I mentioned earlier, how stakeholder engagement and communication are tied together, right? That also let us know the level of communications that we need to have in order to achieve the desired engagement. Sometimes if you over communicate, it can under engage people, right? So we have to find the right mix. So here's one of our last case studies.
Quick question: is the stakeholder engagement matrix an output of a plan stakeholder engagement?
No, it's
Or is it just something that you create?
It's something we use. So if it's something we use, that would be called a
Tool and technique.
Yep.
But
like to say these are tools and these are techniques. They'll just say, oh, that's a tool and technique. So everything's a tool and a technique. Just remember that from PMI.
Okay, but where did it come from? Like we had to create it, right? It had to be an output. Is it a project document?
It's not an output. It's a stakeholder engagement assessment matrix is like a it's a okay, a requirements traceability matrix. You see how it's not like we create that, but it's a tool because it's a matrix that we then it's got some outlines. Okay, stakeholder desired engagement level, and then you kind of fill in the data. So then we eventually create, like we use that to then say, okay, now here's how we're going to engage people. Here's our stakeholder engagement plan. We use an engagement assessment matrix to create it. So that's what that is. It's like a
Oh, I
traceability
see.
matrix. Yeah. So it's a tool and a technique. It can be an output, but it would just be a project document. But it's really a tool and a technique that we use. And we got it
Okay.
when we planned stakeholder engagement. We also used it when we were managing stakeholder engagement. So now that we're monitoring, we're literally just like, we have this plan and think that we have a whiteboard and it's got like a little matrix on it. And stakeholders are represented by like, little colored cards with a little magnet on the back of it. And we're moving as we have a plan. We note that where we want them to be versus where they're at. So maybe we have like a whiteboard that has two spots. And then as the project runs, we start to move stakeholders into certain boxes. And then we say, they should be in this box, right? And then as we monitor communications and we monitor stakeholder engagement, we note that where they're at. And then we say, are they still there? Okay, great. We're making a plan to move them down here. Is that plan working? That's kind of what it is.
I see. It's not static.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So here we go. Monitor communications. The last, not the last, but one of the last.
Okay.
All right. So what should John do to mitigate the damage caused by the failure to follow the communication plan and to improve future performance?
A.
Okay. Which project document should be updated? Which project document should be updated to document the engagement and communication issue uncovered with stakeholder J and how it was resolved?
D.
Okay. If a change request had been submitted and approved to modify the approach, frequency, or method of communicating information, which document or plan would be least likely to be updated? Yeah, that's it. You're gonna have to read that one a couple times. That's PMI speak right there.
C.
Okay. Oops. Okay, and then further analysis of the work performance data uncovered that less than 50% of the stakeholders review the weekly project updates. What should John do to improve the effectiveness of his communication plan?
B.
Okay, let's take a look how we did. So going back, we chose A and D, and then C and B. So A and D, got those both right, good. Right, you got to meet face to face with the stakeholder. So that's always take the most aggressive action or the most assertive action. So that's good, meet face to face. We're not just going to send an email or move somebody or submit a request. All right, and then which project document should be updated? The issue log. Why? Because that's issues between stakeholders. A change log, issues for the project. Project management plan just has the approaches and the baselines, and the stakeholder engagement matrix is a tool and a technique. Okay. And let's see, then we got to, and did you choose C and B here? Yes, you did. So the requirements traceability matrix, that will be least likely to be updated because, you know, we're not changing any requirements. This is all about stakeholders. So that's good. And then D, got to determine the issue with the current format and initiate a change request. Again, you're taking the most assertive action here. Okay, good. Now we monitor risk. And in this process, you know, monitor risk and monitoring controlling process group, it's pretty straightforward. In this case, we're looking at the risk responses. So think we're building condos off the coast of Florida and a hurricane's coming and we've put sandbags out. That was our mitigation plan. Let's put sandbags out. We can't minimize the probability of the hurricane. We can't minimize the occurrence, but we can minimize the impact of the water coming in our building. So we put the sandbags out. So the hurricane comes and pounds on our building for 3 or 4 days, and then the hurricane subsides. We come out a couple of days later when it's safe. We go to look and we say, oh crap, some of our sandbags broke. And now we got sand in our drain. And now we got to spend additional money remediating the sand out of our drainage system. And so now we realize that, okay, the risk response, while effective against the building, it still caused additional damage. Therefore, we either need to use a different type of burlap sack, or maybe perhaps use a different vendor that's going to have sandbags that are going to be more durable, or maybe we can't use sandbags. Maybe something else is going to need to be used. And that's the idea of monitoring risk, because we're looking at the the effectiveness of our risk response. But then after that, we're tracking new risk. Now that we found a new risk, oh, sand can get into the drain if we use these sandbags. Okay, now we got to go qualify what's the probability of occurrence times its impact, quantify what's that going to look like in dollars, come up with a risk response. Should we avoid using sandbags? Should we mitigate that by covering up the drain? Maybe putting some type of filter on top of the drain so water gets through, but debris stays on top. All right, so we have to start, we go through that whole identify, qualify, quantify, come up with a risk response, but we do it all at once for that new identified risk. So monitoring risk is kind of like all of those processes at once, and then also looking at the effectiveness of the responses that have been implemented with the plan all at the same time. And it's performed throughout the project. Okay. And any change requests that come up for corrective or preventative change will come up with those, and we'll update project documents. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much the whole process explained, right? I mean, you see the outputs, right? There's not a whole lot of difference. And I mentioned that when we started executing, that now that you learned everything in the plan, executing was just going to follow the plan. Monitoring and controlling was going to check on the plan, right? And so that's what we're doing here. So data in, information out, we see that there. All right. Record the effectiveness or the ineffective risk mitigation methods, and then identify some corrective or preventative actions, change the type of sandbags that we use, and put a filter on top of the drain, right? And now we got to modify our baseline. Well, we lost 4 days of work, well, 7 days of work, 3 days for the hurricane. We had to wait another 3 days for it to subside, a day for us to assess the damage. And then now we're going to lose another week of work because we have to do remediation before we can get back on track, right? So we'll look at those types of things. Those become our outputs. We use the risk register in the report along with the plans, performance data, what's happening, and the work performance report. How is the project doing overall? We got to take that along with what's happening now as inputs as well. And then we'll audit, all right? We'll do a technical performance analysis. How did these burlap sacks compare to the plastic sacks, right? And then reserve analysis. If another hurricane were to show up, are we going to still be able to finish this project? Will we be able to still protect the building enough and have enough money left over to complete the job? And so that's what we see there. And we can also audit our particular process. So when we do a risk audit, that's us going back and looking at our full processes from how we developed the plan, where we developed our probability and impact matrix, and we came up with our risk categories in a risk breakdown structure. And I probably didn't mention this to you last time, but that's like those risk categories this is where like weather is not a risk. Okay. Weather is a category of risk under which we can have a thunderstorm or a drought or a heat wave or a hurricane or a tornado, right? The weather itself is not a threat. It's just a condition. And under that category of conditions, we can certainly have threats of earthquakes out here, but we don't have threats of hurricanes in California, or it's vice versa in Florida. All right. So that's kind of what we do when we do a risk audit. It's looking at us internally at our processes and saying that, did we come up with a good plan, and did we identify risk everywhere properly, and did we properly qualify and quantify those risks, and were our risk responses developed, were they adequate, as compared to the actual threat or opportunity itself. Okay, so when you see that term on exam, that's us looking internally. We're also going to see a procurement audit, and it's the same thing. So don't procurement audits, you think, oh, something we bought and we got to go check the vendor. No, that's checking on our process. So risk audits, procurement audits, quality audits are all the same thing. The difference is that a quality audit is done by somebody outside the team versus when somebody within the team is doing it, we call it quality assurance. And then a risk audit and a procurement audit are still internal as well, right? So risk audit, procurement audits, we're looking at our processes internally. Quality audit, we're looking at our process internally, but someone from outside the team will do it. Whereas quality assurance is where we do that internally. So just kind of giving you a sense of how those all tie together. Any questions on monitor risk?
No.
Okay, next case study.
Okay.
Which of the following is not one of the 4 key objectives of the monitor risk process?
Hmm. That's a hard one.
Well, which one is it not? What can we delete? Or if the other strategy, because remember, it's not your job to answer every question correctly. It's your job to approach it correctly. So if you don't know the answer to this question and you're running out of time, right? It's past 72 seconds. What's your
Mhm.
next technique?
Eliminate the ones that you know aren't correct.
Okay, but you don't know if any of them are correct. So
Just
now what do you fall back to?
pick the longest answer.
There you go.
Okay,
You're gonna fall back
I'll
to.
say D. Yeah.
Okay, what is the proper frequency at which the monitor risk review meeting should be held?
D.
And what 2 types of data analysis are used during the monitor risk process to compare the schedule versus actual technical accomplishments and to evaluate the impact of risk on contingency reserves?
C.
Okay. DDC. Later in the meeting, the team identified a new risk with significant cost and schedule impact that they believe requires preventative action. What course of action should be followed to address the new issues identified?
A.
And blank is the term that describes the approaches and contingencies that project leaders built into their project risk processes that increase a team's ability to respond positively and productively to emergent, unknowable, unknown risk.
C.
Okay, so we have, I thought it was DDC. Yeah, DDC, AC. So DDC, good. And BA, and we had AC. So let's come back to this.
Okay.
Assign individuals to implement the new response. That's correct. Okay. What is the proper frequency? Well, it should be aligned. So just note that when you see answers like this that are prescriptive, PMI rarely prescribes what you should do. They always say it depends. It should align. Use your stakeholder assessment. They're never going to really prescribe that something should happen only here. So they stay away from hard words like must, shall, always, will. Like you won't see those terms on the exam. So if you see those in the A, B, C, or D, note that more than likely it's an 80 to 90% chance that that's an incorrect response because PMI uses soft terminology, right? It should align, right? It could. That's how they use it. So that should help you there. And then Yep, technical performance and reserve analysis. They were baiting you to choose contingency analysis. Why did you not choose contingency analysis?
Um, I just remember reserve as one of the tools and techniques.
You hadn't seen contingency analysis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so good, good. It's like, well, what is that? All right, so go with your gut. Always go. Your eyes went to what was, that the human eye will go to what it knows, right? And it'll tell you what it doesn't. I haven't heard of this, so trust your gut, trust your brain. And then we
Can we
did,
go back to the first question?
yes.
So why was the answer D? Is that because that's part of the
Oh
executing
yes, I'm sorry.
process group?
I meant to fully explain this. I gave you the approach first. Okay, what is not one of the 4 key objectives? And you said it's because of I think you said the right answer.
I did, but it was because it was the longest answer.
No, I mean, I think you just said it right now. You said,
Oh,
is it
oh,
because of?
Oh, is it because it's part of the executing process group to assign like the work?
No,
the
when do we
changes?
assign the risk owners?
In planning?
In planning.
Oh, okay.
So that's why at this point, if you so assign individuals to implement new corrective actions to eliminate new risk identified. No, that's not what we would do in monitor risk responses. We would first look at the risk implementations, right? The risk response implementations, have they been implemented correctly, and are they working? And then we would look for any new risk, right? Identify and analyze new risk. That analyze right there, that word for PMI, that's a catch-all. By analyze, we're going to qualify, quantify, and come up with the responses, right? And when we come up with the responses, we're going to assign a risk owner at that point. All that happens in the analysis. So yeah, this is not necessarily a piece there, but it happens in planning, or in your mind, it's because that was already executing or monitoring, controlling. While that's not necessarily the case, I'm happy that you're starting to differentiate the two. Like, no, I'm in a different process group. I couldn't have been doing that there, because that's how you got to think about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and here I think you chose A for this, right? But fully analyze the risk and submit a change request. So you want to take the one that's the most assertive. You can hold a meeting and inform them of the risk, and let's come up with a procedure. But if it has significant cost and schedule impact, that means that your stakeholders need to know, right? Your key stakeholders. So you got to submit a change request. So this one's a little bit, what this question is saying, okay, Karin, can we ask you a question and let you know that one of the baselines are going to change without calling it a baseline? Significant cost and schedule. Can we let you know that one of the baselines is going to change and it requires action? And so since we've already told you that it requires action, what should we do with this new one? Are you just going to hold a meeting, or are you going to analyze the risk and submit a change request? Right? So it's basically asking, like, if we're going to change one of the baselines, do you know that in order to do that, you got to submit a change request? That's what this question wasn't even about risk. If that makes sense.
I see. Yeah, that does make sense.
The more you take these questions, and so this is what we're getting to the end, but like today, when you take this exam, and then when you look at your results, when we go and discuss it tomorrow, that's the stuff that I'm really going to teach you on is how do you now decipher and understand the questions, and right, because now it's going to be about passing the exam. Whereas you're gonna absorb this content, you're gonna understand how to use it and what's the best way for your project. Now you need to know how to pass the exam. So that's coming. But you're already doing a good job answering most questions. Like I'm fully confident. Like you likely have a week or two of studying after here, 3-4 practice exams, and you're gonna be good to go.
Nice.
That's the most important thing. Like, don't worry about memorizing and reading and flashcards. Yes, you need to know the processes. Yes, you need to know the formulas, but that's just so you can write them down when the exam starts, because you're not going to remember that stuff. Question 189, 3.5 hours in. But taking enough practice exams is that's how you're going to just understand the questions and the format and the framing and be able to just, you know, conquer it quickly. Okay, so now we are on to monitor, procure, or control procurements, right? And so we want to make sure that the seller and the buyer's performance meet the requirements. So any closed procurements happens here, right? We check on our vendors, and then we audit ourselves for our processes, and we close our procurements out in this one process, control procurements. All right, so here we are, control procurements. And we want to evaluate contract progress. All right, we want to make sure basically if we're 75% of the way in, then you should have 70% of the deliverables completed, unless in the contract you're going to deliver it all at once, right? So we just want to hold people to the letter of the contract. That's really what it is, ensuring that both parties meet their obligations, right? And then confirming that everything gets approved, right? Because we may be the project management company that is doing that. It's kind of like the GC. If I'm the general contractor, I'm really just implementing all the stuff that you as the owner have bought for your home or your commercial building. And then I'm managing all the labor. You're paying me to also manage all the labor that you've also bought to complete all of the building that you need, right? And so in this case, I need to ensure that both parties meet their contractual obligations. Plumbers, electricians, carpenters, did you guys do your stuff to the letter of the contract and to the specs and the requirements that we've asked? And then buyer, owner, I understand I'm your rep, but are you showing up and are you approving these and are you signing them off at a timely manner so we don't have a backlog? Because likely we have something in the contract that says that as well, that as, you know, deliverables are produced, you have so many days in order to say yes or no. And if not, we just assume that they're accepted and then you need to release payment, right? So there could be contractual obligations on both sides, and PMI will place you sometimes in the shoes of the buyer and sometimes in the shoes of the seller. So just, you know, they know that when we manage projects, we have both. So keep that in mind. You see that we get the specific output here is closed procurements. And then after that, all of the outputs are generic. Data in, information out. We can get updates to our documents, updates to our approach. Oh, and excuse me, the other one is procurement documentation updates. We get an update here as well. Those are the two specific outputs. So let's take a look. So the key outputs, work performance information, you know, comparing actual to expected. You may get some requests for change. You may update your approach. Now, closed procurements. Here goes the specific output here. Formal written notice that the contract's been completed. Sign off. Please sign. Please sign off on our install, right? We had a new dishwasher installed yesterday and they sent the wrong one. And the guy was like, well, you know, he took out the old one, had already put the new one in, and it was like, well, that's not black stainless steel, that's just stainless. And he's like, oh, and well, we could have just put the old one back in, but then he would not have got credit for his install. And so I said, you know what, leave it there. You did all the work. I don't want you to lose credit, you know? So that's kind of the same thing. It's like, you know, in order for him to close his procurement out as a third party to Costco, he needed to get signed. So I had to sign his document to help him out, let Costco send something on the other side, right? But I could have said, nope. I refuse it. Put my old dishwasher back, take this one away, bring something back. And now you need to come back and complete the job and then you'll get paid, right? So PMI will give you actual questions that give you scenarios very close to what I just described, right? A lot, that's like a very common scenario. And we look at that and close procurements. If it's not formally authorized, I don't care that you completed it and the dishwasher works. I haven't signed your document. It is not closed for PMI. Just keep that in mind. It needs that formal, that term formal is powerful. Formal approval needs to be in writing. All right, now we update our OPAs. All right, okay, we're moving this company from our preferred seller list. They sent us a wrong product. They're always sending us wrong products. We're not going to work with them anymore. Something like that can happen. You know, lessons learned, we'll update that. We'll take the procurement documentation as an input itself, right? Well, what did we order? What did the original order say? Well, what's the model number on yours? Oh, in fact, I did order the wrong thing. Or nope, in fact, you sent me the wrong one. All right, so we'll look at that. We'll look at project plans. We'll take data as an input. We use all those in inputs to create those outputs. And the tools and the techniques are the inspection. I went over and I inspected the thing and I said, well, that don't look like the right color, right? He tested it, plugged it in, made sure everything was going. I simply inspected it. And, you know, at that point, and it wasn't good. Now I went back and I audited my process. When I did a procurement audit, it was like, well, how did I buy this? What order did I put in? What model number did I choose? How did this go wrong? All right. And I went back and said, oh, nope, there was nothing wrong in my process. Everything was good. All right. So an audit is a structured and defined, you know, sort of piece. And that's how we can go and make changes to our process. Okay. And then data analysis is just going in and looking at the data being how long did it take you? How much did it cost? You know, what did you install and did you level it? And, you know, how does that compare to what our documentations, our requirement traceability matrix, whatever, how does that compare? All right. We can use the claims administration procedure. Let me dive into this one a little bit. So me and the installer had a disagreement about the product that was installed. Okay. He's like, well, this is the product that was sent to me. And I'm like, well, this is not the product that I ordered. And so the first thing that we did is we tried to negotiate. And we can negotiate. Well, okay, you can keep this, we can keep that, or all right, I'll sign your form, but I want a new dishwasher. And if that didn't work, the next step is we can go to mediation, right? We can mediate. We can introduce a neutral third party. We can call up the neighbor and say, neighbor, does that look like stainless steel or black stainless steel to you? And then they can look and say, oh, nope, that looks like stainless steel. It's not black stainless steel. And say, okay, yep, neutral third party. But mediation is not binding. So I could say, you know what? I care less about what you say. I still want my new dishwasher. And now we can escalate from negotiation to mediation to arbitration. And now arbitration, quicker to get on the docket rather than full-blown litigation. Usually a panel of judges, a single judge, or a panel of 3 or 5, and they'll make a ruling, and that ruling is final. Okay, and that ruling is legally binding, but I can still appeal and say, you know, judges, kick rocks. I don't like your thing, and I think you're wrong, and I'm going to appeal to a higher court. And if my appeal is won, then they can go hear my case, and they can go to full-blown litigation. Now we can go to trial, and we can have a jury with a judge, and they can make the determination there. So that's your claims administration procedure. PMI will describe, if they describe something that you're either negotiating, mediating, arbitrating, or litigating, and they say what's happening, you pick it. If PMI says what should you do, you say I'm going to use a claims administration procedure. You don't pick negotiating or mediating or arbitrating or litigating, because in fact sometimes the contracts will say that arbitration is the preferred method. We don't even mediate, we don't litigate, we just arbitrate, and that'll be binding. Sometimes contracts will say that. So if just like in the conflict resolution technique, you pick what's happening, or if they say what should you do, you're always going to pick collaborate, problem solve. For the claims administration procedure, if they describe what's happening, you pick one of those, or if they say what should you use, you're going to use the claims administration procedure. Understand?
Got it.
Okay. All right. Now we go on to stakeholder engagement. Let's control the stakeholder engagement. So we want to maintain the efficiency and the effectiveness of how we're engaging people, right? And our whole source here is to engage folks, to make sure they stay engaged. So here we go, monitor stakeholder engagement. And just like with monitor communications, monitor stakeholder engagement is all about trying to make little small incremental changes so that people get what they need, so that they're participating, right? And then remember, this could be your team members. This is not just outside stakeholders. You could have team members that all of a sudden, one, like you have 5 team members and one of them said something nasty to the other, and now that person is now disengaged, meaning they're not participating in the meetings, they're just kind of looking around, they're not saying anything, they're disengaged. Okay, what must I do to re-engage you? I can either do that by looking at you as a stakeholder, and then I can use some communication tools to assist, right? So that's what we're doing here. This process is performed throughout the entire project from the moment that you got the charter signed. And that sponsor is like, hey, what's the budget looking like? hey, do you have a project management plan? When are we going to be done? Like, when are we going to be done? Like, it's like, hey, take it easy, Mr. Mrs. Sponsor. We just started this 2 days ago. You're monitoring, controlling that stakeholder, right? Their level of engagement and the communication you have with them all the way until you close the project. So just another example of how we jump back and forth between process groups. The moment we initiate a project, we're already monitoring, controlling, because as we're planning, we're actually executing the project. We're burning hours to create the plan, right? So we jump back and forth process groups all the time. Here's a good example of it. All right, so you see there's no specific outputs here. No specific outputs, potentially requests for change, updates to our approach or our documents, and then we get work performance information. So let's look at the tools and techniques that we might use. We will get an issue log as an output. All right. Disagreements between stakeholders or their attitudes. We will get the risk register. Stakeholders are the biggest risk to our projects. All right. The stakeholder register and our lessons learned. There goes our 3 living, breathing documents. All right. Now, here's a stakeholder engagement assessment matrix right here. All right. We made this in managed stakeholder engagement. We use it as a tool and a technique, and then the document was an output. And so we just have those stakeholders that fall into some category, and we want to move someone from unaware to resistant to neutral. One quick second. Okay. So, and as we change stakeholders and we try to move them from being resistant to neutral to supportive to leading, we will request change. We will request change with, our processes for how we communicate with people, for, how we engage people, or is it going to be in person or is it going to be virtual? We'll change some of those things just to purposely make sure that we can bring the engagement level up to where it should be. All right, so we take data in, take project documents as inputs. All right, nothing else that we haven't seen already. And then we use our interpersonal skills to do this. So here's where we use our active listening. We talked about this. Don't answer questions for people before they're done. All right, you don't finish their sentences for them. Use our cultural and political awareness. Use our communication skills. This is what we do to make sure that folks stay engaged, that they stay participating, they stay happy with the project. And then we can represent that data. We can show it on a chart or a graph. So either by using the matrix, or we can go back and do stakeholder analysis again and use a stakeholder grid. That's another way that we can represent the data for who's powerful, who has a lot of interest, powerful but no interest, no power but no interest, no power but a lot of interest, right? We can still do that. And then we can also use those to make decisions. The multi-criteria decision analysis, that fancy term. Okay. That's it. Now it's time to close this puppy out. And there is only one process in the closing process group, which is still in the integration management knowledge area. And our whole objective is to finalize all the activities, archive our documents, and formally close the project or phase. It could be a multiple phase project, or it could just be a contract. It's what we were doing. All right. And the point of focus, and like in your case, that's what it is. It's almost like a contract. Okay, implementation's done. We're good to go. And okay, company, are you guys good? Please sign off on this. So now sales can take that back and say, okay, now can you guys pay us, right? And so the whole point of focus is to complete the project, and it pulls everything together, all the planning documents, all the documents created throughout the project. We're gonna submit some final form, get some stakeholder satisfaction survey, and close this puppy out. All right, so it's the formal finalization of everything. We're going to review the plan, ensure everything is complete. The project met its objectives. All documents are up to date. All costs have been, adequately itemized. All personnel is then released and sent to other projects, or, they're reallocated for whatever it is they need to do. And any project that gets terminated before it completes or before we close, we got to document the reasons, right? So projects can become extinct because they're no longer valid. They can become starved because there's no longer any money, right? So there's different terms for that. PMI doesn't test you on it, but that's what they like: project starvation, project extinction. You know, those things happen, and PMI just says, hey, you need to adequately document that they can, you know, become an OPA for the company.
Mhm.
So the output here is the final product, service, or result transition. This could be transition into operations or production environment for software. It could also be operations for a building. It's now built, it's been commissioned, and now people can start using it and occupying the space. Right? We get a final report, and then we update our project documents, and all of this becomes an OPA. So we take all of the inputs, and we want to use those inputs to officially transition the project over, produce a report. All right, the customer formally approved. You need that formal approval. And then we take the charter. Charter said what the goal of the project is and what the acceptance criteria is. So we need that in order to complete the project. We take the project management plan because it had all the plans for how we're going to achieve the goal and then get sign off. Right? We manage project knowledge along the way. We perform integrated change control. All of those documents will now be taken as an input, along with any issues, the risk report, if there is any open risks that are remaining, why we chose the numbers we did for time and cost, if we performed above or under what we thought we would, the changes that happened because, you know, from what we originally scoped out to now, this is what you're getting. Here's sort of the revision history. All right, here's all of our test documents, how everything happened. Here's your traceability matrix showing sign off for each individual requirement. All right, and here's what we learned along the way. All of those things are taken into account. The accepted deliverables themselves, you signed off on all of these, Mr. and Mrs. Sponsor. All of our contracts that have now been closed and any other procurements, RFPs that we've conducted. And now we use our expert judgment and we go and we analyze the data. We can use the regression analysis, regression to go backwards. Have you done regression analysis in your job?
Is it like a post-mortem review of a project?
Sort of. And regression analysis, you just need a lot of data. It's just if you have data, and by data, it's sort of like a lot of testing things. So let's say you've done your implementation and there was many different ways to do it and introduce this into the customer's environment. And then you go back and you change some data points. You say, okay, had we did this in this environment and that in this environment, what would have happened? It's like just going back and saying, okay, if we change this piece, what would the project have looked like?
Oh,
That's
yeah,
regression analysis. It's to regress, to go backwards, make a change and see what it would have been.
I
Right?
see. Yes.
That is. And then trend analysis and variance analysis, right? Just looking at plan versus the results. So here, well, any questions before we get to our last case study?
No. That
Okay,
makes sense.
here we go.
All right.
Which of the following is not an objective of the closed project or phase process?
B.
Of the 4 data analysis techniques used in the closed project or phase, which technique is focused on identifying lessons learned and knowledge sharing opportunities to help improve future projects?
C.
Okay, let's see how we did. So B and C. Oh, 2 more. To complete the closed project or phase process, the customer must formally confirm that the final deliverables were transferred to his or her ownership. During which process did the customer accept the deliverables met? During which process did the customer accept that the deliverables met the acceptance criteria?
B.
Okay. And Sarah instructed John that a critical output of the closed project process was the completion and archive of the lessons learned register. Why is ensuring that the register is probably updated and archived important?
D.
Okay, so we have B, C, D, B. Okay. B, got that right. Obtain customer approval of the project deliverables. Okay. That's not an objective of the closed project or phase. Where do we get customer approval?
Validate scope.
Perfect. And then of the 4 data analysis techniques used in the closed project, which technique is focused on identifying lessons learned? You chose trend analysis, I think.
Yeah, I didn't think document analysis was a tool and technique.
Oh yeah, I remember document analysis, and then so we have document gathering, document analysis, and then document representation. Those are like the 3 main tools and techniques. And now we've been talking about, like, when we say document
Data.
gathering techniques, we'll say, oh, well, we can use surveys, and you don't have to memorize all those. Like we had to in versions 5, 4, 3, and 2, and 1, right? Now PMI says, well, we're not going to make you memorize all these different tools and techniques. You just need to know that those are document gathering techniques, or they're document analysis techniques, or they are document representation techniques.
Got it.
So I remember that's PMI's favorite word, analysis. They love the analysis. In this case, trend is what's the line doing? We talked about regression, and then variance is different, is plan versus actuals. So that'll help you out too. If you didn't know the answer, you could be like, well, if we're looking at plan versus actuals, it's not variance, right? We're not closing that. So that's one way to do it. And then
I just thought it was a made up term.
We don't get to the end of instruction and you're like, CJ, you haven't taught me this yet. Like, no, we've been looking at this. Good. Now you remember. But that's the whole point. Get it wrong in here so you don't get it wrong in exam. And that's the same thing for the next one. When you take this exam today, just do your best. Do not worry about your score. Your final score is no indicator. I've had a 92, 2 90s, and 4 88s. And 2 of the people that got an 88 did not pass on the first try. And the lowest score that I've gotten on this is a 30. And that person took the exam the following Monday and passed. So, I mean, I'm just that now those are the anomalies, right? Everybody else
Yeah.
fits in the middle, but just telling you, like your score is no true indicator. Okay, so you got validate scope there, and then B, I think you chose C on this last one. Did you chose B?
I chose B.
You chose B. Okay, good. All right, that's it. We're done. 716 slides up, 716 slides down. A little under 32 hours of instruction. So this is our same class that we teach in university, 16 hours a week, hour and 50 minutes at a time. And that 17th week final exam kind of covers the last 10 minutes we missed those 16 weeks. So that's it. You are now eligible to press apply on your application, but I have not seen a paragraph from you, Karin.
I have it. I have it.
Okay.
I can send it right now. Do you want me
Yes.
to email it?
Yeah, send that to me so I can look at it today, and then when we meet tomorrow, after we go over everything, I'll have something for you.
Okay, so I have a couple questions too about that part of the application. Let's see. So my job title at this job was a solutions architect. I don't necessarily have to be a project manager, right? I'm managing the project.
Right.
And then for the budget, how do I calculate that? Do I just sum up the salary, like salaries of all of the stakeholders involved in the time that we spent, or is that just like a rough estimate?
Yeah, it's a rough estimate, and you can do it in both ways. Well, you gave me one. The other way you can do is just whatever the implementation cost. I don't know if those numbers are shared with you. You know, okay, this project, this customer paid us X amount for this project, right? If you have that number, that's what you put in there. If you don't, then maybe you guys have a head count, so you can go back to the people at your company and say, hey, I'm trying to figure this out. What is if you were to take, and I'm sure they have this, if they were to take everybody's salary, including how much it costs for rent and benefits and all that, and then divide that by the head count at the organization, then you can get an hourly rate for each person, and you can take the amount of hours that you guys used for that, including yourself, and then then you make that the budget. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess that was the main question I had, but I'll email the project description now. Did I have other questions? Oh yeah, and then the approach, it's likely going to be a hybrid, right? For like software.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And definitely put that in there. That's going to help you if you decide to go for your ACP, being able to use this same experience and getting your ACP, because I'll tell you right now, the second that you take this exam and pass it, and you've already been exposed to Agile, mentally, I know mentally I'm going to tell you this, you're not going to feel as comfortable, but I'm going to tell you that you could turn right around and take the ACP, and you don't even need to take an ACP course. You could just go take that ACP exam and pass it if you wanted that credential, right? But just because you already have experience in it with Scrum, the questions are not like, there's not much. Scrum is tiny compared to the PMP. So in the 150 questions they're going to ask you, it's going to be a variation of the same 15 things about a sprint review and a sprint planning and backlog grooming, and the difference between a Scrum master and a developer, and you know what I mean? So it's very, very simple, but we're focused on the PMP now. So let's stay there. And yeah, you'll be fine. You're going to do fine.
Okay.
Your approach for the exam today is you get to have 2 sheets of scratch paper. Okay, so 2 sheets of white paper, front and back. If you want to print out the 49 processes, you can do that and use it, because we expect that on the day of the exam, you would create that. And if you want to print out the formulas and use that, you can do so as well. Have you gone in? You have not taken an exam yet, right?
Not through PM Aspire, but
Okay.
I have. Yeah.
So that's where you'll take it. And I believe I showed you how to log into that.
Should I check right now?
Yeah, check right now.
Okay. On the day of the exam, I won't be able to print out like the processes and the formulas, right?
No, you'll
Okay.
create those. So you'll have 2 sheets of scratch paper. They're gonna have you like, if you take it, do you plan on taking it at the facility or do you plan on taking it at home?
Yeah, at the facility.
Okay, so when you go to the facility, yeah, you're just gonna get the 2 sheets of scratch paper, and then the moment you start your exam, time's gonna be running, but you're gonna give up 10 to 12 minutes to write down all the processes, write down all the formulas.
Okay, but is there a time limit on writing down the formulas, or that's just the best practice?
Self-imposed.
Okay.
Don't take more than 15 minutes.
Okay.
But no, there's no PMI time limit. You have 4 hours from the moment you start to complete, and the counter will grade your exam at 4 hours unless you press complete beforehand. Okay. Not penalized for incorrect responses. So you start writing, and however long it takes you is however long it takes you. But again, don't go more than 15 minutes. 12 is the average. And as you're writing this, time yourself too. As you start writing down your processes and your formulas, like, at some point you should be able to get it under 10 minutes. You got to do it in 9 minutes is about what you should do.
Okay. Yeah, I can log in. By the way, I memorized the earned value management formulas already.
I knew you would. No, that you had already memorized the processes. I'm like, this is almost cheating, Karin. You're like my prototypical student. Like you understand tests. It's like I can just teach you and give the information, and you're gonna do well. I have no worry. My only worry is if you score too high on the first exam, and then people they feel good about that and they relax a little bit. So just note that your first score today, you're going to guess on half of these things. You're not going to just know all of them, right? So if you guess and you guessed right this time, that don't mean you're going to guess right the next time or the next one, right? So just know that at minimum 4 to 6, but after the 4th one, if you're scoring 80 to 85 and you're doing it in less than 3 hours, you're probably ready, okay? So that's likely where you're at. You're probably more in the 4 range, but 6 is the magic number, just so you know. I have not had a person fail the exam who took 6 practice exams. I'll say that 0. So that's your magic number. I see you here for this batch, and you're able to log in. You'll go to the simulated exam. Simulated exam, and you'll take any one of. I want you to take the one with 200 questions. Okay. So I have some that are 100.
Okay.
Yeah, either
anyone?
exam 3, 4, or 5 with anyone that you want to take, but take one of those because a full 2-length practice exam.
Okay.
Okay.
And Can I take like a break if I need to go do something else and come back to it, or should I take it through all the way through?
I prefer that you take it all the way through, but life will do what it does, right? So if you can't sit down for 4 hours and take it, I do prefer for that this first time you find some 4-hour block and you do it, because we want to talk about your experience. We want to talk about like all of that, and you won't get the full experience if you break it up. But now, if you got to go 3.5 hours and then come back and do the last half hour or something, that's not a big deal, because at least you've gotten through the bulk of it. But I want you to get at least 3.5 hours of just straight like focus time, because we got to talk about your mental capacity. And like when that goes out the window, you'll experience that, where you're getting 4 to 5 questions right, 1 or 2 wrong, 4 to 5 questions right, 1 or 2 wrong. And somewhere about question 80 to 120, that's when your mental stamina goes down. And now you get 4 or 5 questions wrong, 1 or 2 right, 4 or 5. So we got to, I want to see that. I want to see the types of questions that you struggle on. And if you're picking the wrong answer, I know that sounds weird, but if you're picking you could fail this exam, but you could have picked all the wrong ones. And I'm like, okay, perfect. You're actually okay. You're picking the question that it's just designed. It's tricking you into picking. And the more exams you take, you'll beat that, but you're not picking the completely wrong answer. You're not picking one of the 2 that you should have been able to eliminate. All right. So I want to see that. And then we'll also talk about some other strategies that, like reading here, and I'll give you a few. I want you to think about reading the last sentence first, last 1 or 2 sentences first, because many times that's the actual question. That's how I want you to take this first exam, right? There's
Okay.
5 other techniques. I don't even want to tell you about those right now. The first technique for today's exam is as much as you can, try to 200 times read the last 1 or 2 sentences and see if you can answer the question. If you can't, then go back and read. That's the first technique that I want to give you for this exam. And that's about it. So let's talk about tomorrow.
Okay.
When would you like to start?
So it's scheduled for 9:30.
Yeah, our schedule start at 9:30, so it's going to be
Okay.
review.
So how long will the review usually take? We'll just go through each question.
Yeah, we out of the 200 questions on average, we hit 80 to 100. Like in a class of 18, you know, because we all take the exact same exam on that day, so that way we have the same questions, and somewhere between 80 and 110, 105-ish questions before people are like, all right, we get it. I don't even need to see the other wrong ones, right? And we just jump back and forth, you know, question 17, 25, 14, 92, right? We just jump all the way through, and then about 100 questions, about half the exam is about what you need, because there's about 8 or 9 question types. And so you'll get those wrong. And as we go through and we discuss them, you'll see the pattern, you'll see what you missed, why you got it wrong. And then it sort of clicks. Oh, okay. And then the other ones that you got wrong, you're like, you see it for yourself. That's the most valuable thing. That's where I want you to get. So like you'll experience that somewhere at, I don't know, that usually takes about somewhere between an hour and a half to 2.5 hours. So 90 minutes to 2.5 hours before that light bulb clicks. And you're like, okay, I need no more review. And then we will talk about your paragraph. We will talk about other exam taking techniques. I'll give you the study guide to get you through, and then set you up with a system. So that way you can just follow the system to getting past. And then if you have any questions along the way, you contact me. And that's usually how it goes, right? We cover the exam, we cover the application. We cover the exam, I give you the system. Usually then I release people because some people don't need help with the application. Then we cover the application. And then anything else you need, any special topics, special reviews, any questions, we do that. And then that's it. So being that it's just going to be me and you, I don't know that it'll take any shorter or any longer. I never know, because sometimes with just one person, now they have lots of questions and they have access to me. And so we take longer. And then sometimes when it's just one person, they're kind of timid and they don't ask enough questions and I have to probe them. And so I still, they get the full experience, but then it's shorter. So I don't know where you'll fit. All right. We'll see. We have 5 hours and it won't likely take us 5. That I can say,
Okay. I don't have a preference, actually. I could do early also, like today.
Okay.
Maybe like 8 o'clock or something if you're available.
Yeah, I'm up. So we'll start tomorrow at 8 and we'll plan to go at worst case scenario 8 to 1 with a half-hour break in there. But more than likely, we probably can do, if you can go like 3.5 hours straight, we probably can be done at 11:30, noonish, and just power through. So we'll see, because it will be the morning time. A lot of times the morning times are more fresh and it's easier to go longer, but we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. So 8 o'clock tomorrow, I'll take my test today. And yeah, that's it for today, right? Okay.
All right. Good luck. Good luck.
Awesome.
Good luck.
Thanks so much, CJ. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Oh, I'll send over my project description too.
Yes,
for
please.
the application. Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.